Alexandra Kemp, born on October 11, 1982 in Leawood, Kansas, a city with a population of just over 30,000 people, was raised in one of the most affluent suburbs in the Kansas City metropolitan area. Known as Allie to her friends and family, she resided there with her parents and two brothers. From a young age, Allie displayed remarkable energy and enthusiasm, actively participating in 19 different sports teams and engaging in various extracurricular activities throughout her school years. Soccer was her true passion, and she excelled both on the field and in her academic pursuits. Upon graduating from high school in 2001, pursued her dream of studying ecology at Kansas State University. Her desire to make a positive impact on others motivated her career choice. Allie even had plans to travel to Russia as part of an exchange program assist orphan children. In 2002, after completing her freshman year of college, 19-year-old Allie returned home for the summer break. She sought a part-time job and cherished the opportunity to spend quality time with her loved ones before resuming her studies. Reuniting with her long-term boyfriend Phil brought her immense joy. Although they had chosen different universities after high school, they managed to sustain their relationship despite the distance, with summer breaks being their only chance to be together. Allie and Phil were fortunate enough to secure employment at the local public pool, and Allie's younger brother also joined them. Their work schedules were arranged consecutively, with Phil working mornings, Allie during the day, and her brother in the evenings. On Thursday, June 18th, Allie arrived for her shift, relieving Phil. Initially, she contemplated asking him to stay a little longer, but ultimately decided against it as they had plans for a date later in the evening. The day was rather gloomy, resulting in fewer visitors at the pool. Allie occupied herself at her desk, engrossed in a book, eagerly awaiting the end of her workday. As evening approached, her younger brother arrived at the pool to commence his shift. To his surprise, Allie was nowhere to be found. Allie's phone, keys, and personal belongings were left unattended on the table, but Allie herself was nowhere to be found. After thoroughly searching the area, he made the decision to contact their parents. Their father, Roger Kemp, hurried over, growing increasingly concerned as the situation seemed peculiar. He knew that Allie wouldn't simply abandon her belongings, including her phone, and leave work early. Roger meticulously combed through the entire area, meticulously checking every nook and cranny. Eventually, he arrived at the pump room. The room was enveloped in darkness, and initially he didn't notice anything suspicious. However, as he was about to depart, something caught his attention. In the corner, there was a blue tarp spread out, and a foot was protruding from beneath it. His heart sank as he approached, realizing that it was his daughter lying beneath the tarp. Allie was covered in blood and bruises, showing no signs of life. Additionally, her shorts and underwear were missing. Roger promptly dialed for an ambulance, but unfortunately the doctors were unable to save her. She passed away shortly after being admitted to the hospital. Medical experts determined that Allie had sustained a severe head injury, and the cause of death was strangulation. They also discovered numerous defensive wounds, indicating that Allie had fought back against her attacker. The police initiated an investigation and swiftly uncovered the first piece of evidence. There was an open first aid kit with a pill container on the floor of the pump room, near where the victim was discovered. It was sent to the laboratory, where experts found male DNA on the container and its lid. Biological samples were also found on Allie's clothing. After comparing all of these samples, experts concluded that they belonged to the same man, although he was not in the FBI database. The police commenced their search for potential suspects, beginning with Allie's boyfriend. Given the brutality of the assault, investigators considered the possibility that the assailant may have had personal motives. According to Phil, after his shift, he went to visit friends, and his alibi was corroborated by multiple individuals. In addition, he also provided his DNA sample, which did not match the perpetrators. The same was true for Allie's father and brother, as they both promptly provided their samples as well. Roger was overwhelmed with grief and spent the entire night at the morgue, refusing to leave Allie's side. The following day, he delivered a heartfelt speech to the gathered city residents, expressing his gratitude for their condolences and vowing to find his daughter's killer at any cost. The news of the murder quickly spread throughout the community, shocking the locals who were unaccustomed to such heinous crimes. Consequently, the police received an abundance of tips, and almost immediately they obtained their first lead. Several individuals who had been at the pool reported seeing a suspicious man lurking around the area the day before the murder, observing them from behind bushes and even filming them. Other witnesses mentioned spotting a man with a similar appearance driving a beige Ford pickup truck in the pool parking lot. None of them recognized the individual, making it unlikely that he was a visitor. Phil provided an additional intriguing detail. Allie had confided in him that she sometimes felt uneasy working alone, sensing that someone was watching her. Although she did not specify if she had seen anyone suspicious near the pool, the accounts of other witnesses suggested that it could have been the same man. Another lead emerged from Allie's friend, Laurel. On the day of the murder, Allie had called Laurel around 3 p.m., expressing her boredom. In response, Laurel decided to drive to the pool to keep her company. When she arrived, she honked her car horn multiple times, expecting Allie to come out and meet her. However, instead of Allie, a man emerged from the pump room and waved at Laurel. Assuming he was Allie's boss, Laurel believed that her presence might cause trouble for her friend and chose to leave. Detectives found Laurel's account significant as they believed this man to be the likely killer. Based on her testimony, they created a composite sketch of the suspect, which was subsequently distributed to local newspapers and TV channels. Phil took the initiative to launch a flyer distribution campaign featuring the composite sketch and a detailed description of the suspect. With the assistance of his companions and a multitude of volunteers, thousands of flyers were distributed throughout the town. Despite these extensive efforts, the authorities were still unable to apprehend the culprit. In an attempt to gather information, Roger also managed to raise $50,000 as a reward for any leads that could lead to the capture of the murderer. Unfortunately, this endeavor did not yield any fruitful results. However, a stroke of inspiration struck Roger later on. He conceived the idea of erecting a billboard along the busy highway he frequently traveled to work, featuring a composite sketch of the suspect. After discussing this idea with the police, they expressed their support. Nevertheless, they informed him that their department lacked the funds to rent a billboard, leaving Roger responsible for covering all the expenses. Roger reached out to a billboard rental company to inquire about the cost. Upon learning about his daughter's tragic murder, they generously offered to provide the billboard free of charge, driven by their desire to assist in solving the case. Allie's father, taken aback by this unexpected turn of events, gratefully accepted their offer. Collaborating with the police, they designed a banner showcasing the composite sketch, the suspect's description, and details regarding the $50,000 reward. Once the billboard was erected, the police began receiving a substantial influx of tips, surpassing 1,000 within a few weeks. Each lead was meticulously investigated, leading them to stumble upon some intriguing leads. One tip pointed towards a local resident named James Strader, who bore a resemblance to the composite sketch. Detectives promptly approached him for questioning, but Strader provided an alibi, claiming he was at work during the time of the murder. His boss corroborated his statement, temporarily eliminating him as a suspect. However, another tip regarding Strader surfaced, revealing that he owned the same type of vehicle as the suspect. The plot thickened as the police discovered that Strader was wanted in 2 states for a series of crimes, including 3 sexual assaults and 2 kidnappings, all allegedly committed within a span of 3 weeks. Shockingly, he had assaulted his ex-girlfriend and coerced her into accompanying him in search of a new victim. Soon after, he ceased his actions and made an attempt to unlawfully enter someone's residence in order to steal money. Coincidentally, during that very moment, a 14-year-old girl happened to be passing by. Strader, using threats, coerced her into his vehicle. He then proceeded to drive to a secluded area where he assaulted both the girl and his ex-girlfriend. After leaving them stranded, departed from the scene. Later on, he approached another woman's home and claimed that his car had broken down. When she opened the door, Strader brandished a knife, forcefully entered the house and assaulted her. Subsequently, He abducted the woman and transported her to a different town. However, she managed to escape from his clutches. Eventually, Strader was apprehended in Utah. He had pulled into a gas station and fled without paying, prompting the staff to contact the police. Shortly after, a police officer noticed his vehicle, pulled him over, ran his identification, and discovered that he was wanted for kidnappings and assaults. While conversing with the officer, Strader displayed a smirk and suggested that he should be handcuffed. In relation to Ali's case, investigators promptly reached out to their counterparts in another state requesting a DNA sample from Strader. However, upon completion of the analysis, the detectives were faced with an unexpected twist. Strader's DNA did not match the sample found on Ali's clothing or the pill bottle. Eventually, Strader was sentenced to life imprisonment for his other crimes, while the detectives persisted in their search for Ali's murderer. Despite months of little progress, in the autumn of 2004, the detectives received an intriguing tip. An individual contacted the police stating that the composite sketch resembled someone they knew, a man named Teddy Hoover. Upon investigating Hoover, the police discovered that he resided in Kansas City and was employed by a pool maintenance company. Furthermore, his name appeared in the case files. Hoover had been questioned alongside others but had not aroused any suspicions. Investigators proceeded to visit his residence and inquire about Ali's murder. Hoover professed that he could barely recall his whereabouts on that specific day, considering it had been 2 years. The officers requested his DNA sample, but Teddy declined, stating he needed to consult with his attorney first. Law enforcement did not hastily eliminate him as a suspect, yet they lacked any proof linking him to the crime. Subsequently, they opted to have another conversation with him, but encountered an issue. Teddy, along with his girlfriend, had vanished without a trace, and their current location remained unknown. A month later, the police received a tip from an anonymous source, revealing that Teddy and his girlfriend had relocated to Connecticut, more than 1,000 miles away from Kansas City. This raised suspicions. Teddy had relocated across the country right after the police began showing interest in him. The detectives contacted the state's postal service to trace Teddy's new address through them, but they found no information about him. They then requested the same for his girlfriend's name, and this time they struck gold. The woman was receiving mail at an address in the small town of Bantam. However, there was a peculiar detail. A man named Benjamin Appleby was also receiving mail at the same address. Upon investigating this name, they discovered that this individual had an extensive criminal history, including robberies and assaults. Intriguingly, Teddy Hoover also had convictions for similar offenses, including an outstanding arrest warrant for public indecency. Detectives began to suspect that something was amiss. According to the postman who regularly delivered letters to Teddy's girlfriend's address, he only ever saw 2 individuals in the residence. Based on his descriptions, Appleby bore a striking resemblance to Hoover. The police once again sought assistance from their counterparts in Connecticut. Upon visiting the house, they confirmed that Teddy Hoover did indeed reside there, leading to his arrest on the public indecency warrant. In the meantime, the detectives assigned to Ali's case had arrived in Connecticut and were making preparations for the upcoming interrogation. They meticulously arranged an investigation board displaying photographs of the victim, Teddy, as well as images from the crime scene in the hopes that it would elicit a confession from Teddy. As soon as Teddy entered the room, he immediately became apprehensive upon seeing the display. Without much delay, he admitted that his true identity was Benjamin Appleby and that Teddy Hoover was the name he had assumed to evade capture, in honor of his deceased friend. Initially, Teddy vehemently denied any involvement in Ali's murder, but his resistance was short-lived. Merely 10 minutes into the questioning, he began to divulge information. According to Benjamin, on that fateful day, he had gone to the pool to meet with the manager and propose his company's cleaning services. It was during this encounter that he noticed Ali and was instantly captivated by her. Finding her in the pump room, Benjamin approached her, attempting to strike up a conversation. Although Ali responded politely to his compliments, it was evident that she was not interested. Undeterred, Benjamin persisted in showering her with compliments. But Ali remained uninterested and attempted to leave. In a desperate attempt to prevent her departure, Benjamin blocked the door with his hand and made an unwelcome advance towards her. When Ali pushed him away, he flew into a fit of rage and began assaulting her. Repeatedly striking her, he proceeded to remove her clothing with the intention of sexually assaulting her. However, upon hearing a car horn outside, he decided to strangle her instead. After concealing her body with a tarp, he ventured outside and noticed Ali's friend, Laurel, sitting in her car. Benjamin waved at her, and she drove away, oblivious to the horrific events that had just unfolded. Subsequently, Benjamin left the crime scene as well. Sometime later, he made the ill-fated decision to return, only to arrive just as the medics were removing Ali's lifeless body from the pump room. It was at this point that the police questioned him, but he managed to avoid arousing any suspicion. Benjamin claimed to be unaware of the motive behind his heinous act and expressed remorse for his actions. He also confessed that he had developed genuine feelings for Ali, and when she rejected him, he lost control of himself. Following his confession, investigators promptly sent his DNA sample to the laboratory, where it was found to match the samples obtained. When questioned about why he took the pills, Benjamin claimed he was searching for a lubricant in the first aid kit. Following his arrest, he enlisted a lawyer who attempted to retract his confession, despite Benjamin's earlier reluctance to subject the victim's family to a trial. Nevertheless, with his DNA discovered on the victim's garments, the likelihood of evading punishment was slim. During the trial, his legal representative contended that the murder was accidental, yet failed to substantiate such a dubious account of events. In 2005, Benjamin was convicted and sentenced to a minimum of 50 years in prison, rendering him ineligible for release until 2054, with no certainty even then. Given his age of 29 at the time of sentencing, it was probable that he would spend the remainder of his life incarcerated. Subsequently, Benjamin has made numerous unsuccessful attempts to appeal his sentence, each one adding to the burden on Ali's family. Her father has made every effort to prevent his daughter's killer from being set free. In memory of Ali, her parents initiated self-defense classes for women, which garnered significant attention and trained tens of thousands of women. Ali's father was even honored with a visit to the White House by Barack Obama, who commended him for organizing the self-defense classes and emphasized their significance. Additionally, Roger was recognized for his innovative idea of displaying information about wanted criminals on billboards, a method that proved to be highly effective and previously unexplored. On September 29, 2018, Daniel Attaway, a 24-year-old, returned to his home on Hardage Farm Drive in Marietta, Georgia. To his horror, he discovered his father, Wayne Attaway, lying lifeless on the floor. Overwhelmed with panic, Daniel immediately dialed 911 to report the tragic incident. Wayne, known for his peaceful nature, had fallen victim to a brutal attack in broad daylight within their quiet neighborhood. The entire town was shaken by this shocking event, unable to comprehend the true nature of Wayne's fate. As the details of that fateful September day unfolded, Wayne's family found themselves consumed by darkness. They were left wondering who could have committed such a heinous act against a simple man like Wayne. Marietta, a city in Cobb County, Georgia, is renowned for its strong sense of community and exceptional educational opportunities. With abundant green spaces, convenient access to amenities, and a diverse range of shopping and dining options, Marietta is often considered one of the best places to reside. However, beneath its pleasant facade, Marietta harbors a darker side. The city experiences higher rates of violent crime compared to many other cities in the United States, necessitating constant vigilance among its residents. The unresolved case of Wayne Attaway's tragic fate in 2018 continues to haunt the people of Marietta. Wayne, born on November 7, 1958, in Box Springs, Talbot County, Georgia, was the son of Clara and George Walden Attaway. Throughout his life, he was affectionately known as Wayne. Growing up with his sisters Beverly, Nancy, and Sylvia, Wayne developed a strong bond with his siblings, becoming a loving brother. During the 1970s, Wayne attended Pacelli Vikings Catholic High School in Columbus, Georgia, where he actively participated in football. Wayne completed his Bachelor of Science in Industrial Management from the Georgia Institute of Technology in 1981. Shortly after, he joined Milliken in LaGrange, Georgia. In 1982, Wayne tied the knot with Carolyn Wojtysiak, whom he had met the previous year. Wayne's career took him to Atlanta in 1988, where he secured a position at Frito-Lay. Later, he ventured into the field of construction with P.J. Rowe Construction in Marietta. Wayne and Carolyn's married life flourished, and they were blessed with a daughter named Morgan on June 5, 1989. During this period, Wayne harbored aspirations of starting his own company, which eventually led to the formation of Woolard Ottman Construction Incorporation on March 25, 1992. Wayne, along with his friends Scott Mannis and Loris Woolard, established this commercial general contracting partnership. Wayne served as the vice president, while Loris held the position of president and Scott became the vice president and secretary. As Wayne thrived in his new professional endeavor, he and Carolyn decided to expand their family further. On April 24, 1994, they welcomed their second child, a son named Daniel. Despite his demanding work schedule, Wayne always prioritized his children and fulfilled his responsibilities diligently. In 1995, Wayne received a Catholic baptism at St. Joseph's Catholic Church in Marietta, Georgia. Although Wayne's business initially operated on Wiley Road in Marietta, it relocated to White Circle on March 29, 2000 due to its growth and expansion. Wayne's dedication and contributions played a significant role in the success of the company over the years. By 2018, with Daniel and Morgan having reached adulthood, Wayne found more leisure time to indulge in various hobbies. He developed a passion for cowboy shooting, carpentry, motorcycle riding, horseback riding, hiking, as well as water and snow skiing. Wayne, a man in his late 50s, was leading a peaceful life in 2018 with his family at his residence on 570 Hardage Farm Drive in Marietta. However, tragedy struck on Saturday, September 29, 2018, when Wayne's family was away and he was alone at home. Upon his son Daniel's return at around 4:30 p.m., he made a shocking discovery. His father, Wayne, lying motionless on the floor, covered in blood. Daniel, in a state of panic, sought help from his neighbors and then called his mother, Carolyn, who did not answer. Subsequently, Daniel dialed 911 and reported the distressing situation to the operator. Responding promptly, officers from the Marietta Police Department arrived at the scene at 4:31 p.m. Daniel guided them to the basement where Wayne's lifeless body was found. The victim, identified as 59-year-old Douglas Wayne Attaway, had sustained 2 gunshot wounds, one in the upper right shoulder and another in the head. Detectives, upon assessing the gruesome scene, wasted no time in initiating their investigation. The investigation began with the detectives questioning the neighbors and Wayne's family members in order to gather any information or potential witnesses related to the disturbing incident. Unfortunately, no one had witnessed anything suspicious near Wayne's residence. However, due to Daniel's prior notification to the neighbors about Wayne's death and the presence of numerous police vehicles, news of the tragic event quickly spread throughout the Hardage Farm Drive neighborhood. This caused concern among the residents, as police presence was uncommon in the area. Officer Chuck McPhillamy, assigned to the case, reassured the residents that Wayne's murder was an isolated incident and there was no need for alarm. Over the next 2 days, the detectives meticulously searched the crime scene and interviewed the neighborhood, hoping to uncover any clues or potential suspects. Wayne's family members were interviewed separately to determine if they had any suspicions or if Wayne had any conflicts with anyone. However, no names were mentioned during these questioning sessions. During the search of the Attaway home, the detectives made a significant discovery. The 6-hour Model P250, a handgun, was missing from the family's collection of weapons. The neighbors informed the detectives that Wayne's brutal murder had deeply shaken the peaceful and affluent Hardage Farm community. They described Wayne as a longtime resident of Marietta, well known and respected by all. They believed that Wayne, a calm individual, had no enemies and was likely shot by an unknown intruder. The detectives then examined the surveillance systems of Wayne's neighbors, hoping to find any valuable clues and urged them to report any information related to the case to the Marietta police investigators. Despite the progress made by the detectives, a crucial piece of information from Wayne's family would ultimately crack the case wide open. A few days following Wayne's murder, the killer himself admitted his guilt to Wayne's family. The confession was made by Daniel, who revealed to his mother Carolyn that he and Wayne had been experiencing a strained relationship and had been frequently arguing. The breaking point for Daniel came when Wayne issued him an ultimatum, intensifying the tension between them. Daniel, who had a passion for painting and often shared his artwork on social media, had recently taken an interest in welding and wanted to improve his skills in that area. However, Wayne's demand that Daniel either find a job or leave the house infuriated him, leading to a moment of uncontrollable rage. On the afternoon of September 29, 2018, when Carolyn and Morgan were not at home, Daniel retrieved a handgun from the family's collection and shot his father in the shoulder and then between the eyes, causing Wayne's untimely demise. After committing this heinous act, Daniel meticulously crafted a false narrative. He contacted emergency services and fabricated a story, portraying himself as innocent. He maintained this deceit when speaking to the officers at the crime scene, insinuating that an unknown intruder was responsible for the murder. Carolyn and Morgan were left in a state of utter shock and despair upon hearing Daniel's confession, which transformed their already sorrowful lives into a grim reality. Daniel expressed remorse and shame for his actions and ultimately decided to surrender himself to the authorities. While Daniel's confession provided substantial evidence linking him to his father's murder, the detectives also uncovered compelling proof. They discovered that Wayne had been shot with a 9mm handgun, and a weapon matching this description was found in the woods near a creek bed, approximately 100 yards away from the family's residence. The Sig Sauer Model P-250 was identified as the murder weapon, which happened to be missing from the Attaway family's gun collection during the initial search of their home. Wayne had purchased the gun himself, but Daniel's name was also on the receipt. To further investigate, the detectives conducted a gunshot residue test on Daniel, which came back positive, confirming the presence of residue on his clothes. By October 1, 2018, the investigators had gathered enough evidence to link Daniel to Wayne's murder. Consequently, on October 2, 2018, Daniel Walden Attaway, the son of the deceased Wayne Attaway, was charged and arrested at 290 Lemon Street in Marietta, Georgia. He faced charges of malice murder, felony murder, aggravated assault with intent to commit murder, and possession of a firearm during the commission of a felony. Daniel was held without bond at the Cobb County Adult Detention Center, awaiting his trial. Wayne's death deeply affected Carolyn, leaving her devastated. Just a few weeks prior, on September 18, 2018, she and Wayne had celebrated their 36th wedding anniversary. The realization that her own son had shattered their once happy family was unimaginable. With a heavy heart, Carolyn and Morgan organized a prayer service at Mays Ward Dobbins' funeral home on October 5, 2018, where Wayne's friends and family gathered to remember and honor him. On October 6, 2018 at 12 noon, a funeral service was held for Wayne at St. Joseph Catholic Church in Marietta. He was laid to rest at Kennesaw Memorial Park in Marietta, Cobb County. Daniel Attaway pleaded not guilty and sought the legal representation of Marietta criminal defense attorney Mazzy Masloum. Although Mazzy hadn't spent much time with Daniel yet, he believed that Daniel appeared to be a decent young man. When inquired about the case, Mazzy mentioned that it was premature to provide any specific comments on the case details. However, he noted that not guilty pleas were common in cases of this nature. On October 9, 2018, Mazzy Masloum, acting as Daniel's attorney, disclosed that an initial hearing for Daniel Walden Attaway was set for November 29, 2018. Mazzy emphasized that his primary objective during the hearing would be to secure additional evidence beyond what was outlined in the arrest warrant. Several hearings were conducted for Daniel's case in the subsequent days, but due to Daniel's uncooperative conduct, a verdict remained elusive. Throughout his time in custody and the subsequent hearings, Daniel's behavior took a concerning turn. As the trial scheduled for 2021 approached, Daniel was declared mentally incompetent. In the same year, Daniel was transferred from Cobb County Jail to Decatur Hospital for a psychological assessment. Although the results of the latest evaluation were presented to the court on April 12, 2021, the reports were sealed. The specifics were not disclosed to the public. Subsequently, Daniel was deemed competent to stand trial by state psychologists. According to the state doctors, they did not believe that Daniel's criminal responsibility was in question, asserting that he was legally sane and capable of proceeding with the trial. Mazzy, Daniel's attorney, mentioned that he would have an independent expert review the state's conclusions. He highlighted that since competency was a dynamic concept, Daniel could proceed with the trial as long as he adhered to his medication regimen and did not experience adverse reactions. Another year passed without a verdict, and by 2022 Daniel had spent 3.5 years in custody at the Cobb County Adult Detention Center. On March 16, 2022, Daniel Walden Attaway pleaded guilty but mentally ill to one count of malice murder in the killing of his father, Douglas Wayne Attaway, in September 2018. Daniel, who was 27 years old at the time, received a 50-year sentence, with 25 years to be served in prison and the remaining 25 years on probation. This was part of his plea agreement, which also required him to undergo mental health supervision throughout his entire time in custody and probation. The announcement of Daniel's sentencing was made public on Friday, March 18, 2022, by Cobb County District Attorney Flynn Brody Jr. through a news release. Despite this significant development, Wayne's family, consisting of Carolyn and Morgan, chose not to comment on the verdict. They were already in the process of healing and did not want to revisit anything that would reopen old wounds. Their focus was on moving forward and building a better future, as the incident had deeply affected their lives. Wayne's case was undeniably tragic, as Daniel's irrational actions had completely altered the trajectory of their family's life. Carolyn, now accepting the reality, strives each day to make it better than the last. On her social media platforms, she shares her most cherished memories of Wayne with her loved ones. In the suburbs of Belhaven, Greenwich, on the pleasant evening of October 30, 1975, summer was in full swing. Martha was determined to convince her mother to allow her to partake in Mischief Night, the pre-Halloween tradition where harmless pranks were played around the neighborhood. After persistent persuasion, Dorothy, Martha's mother, finally relented and granted her permission. However, as the hours passed, Dorothy grew increasingly worried when she couldn't locate her daughter. She reached out to some friends, only to discover that no one had seen Martha. The search for her began, but it didn't take long to find her. Tragically, Martha was discovered lifeless under a pine tree, just 200 feet from her home, brutally murdered with a golf club. The events of that fateful night on October 30th left everyone questioning what had transpired and who could commit such a heinous act against an innocent young girl. The affluent community of Belhaven held many secrets behind its prestigious walls. Greenwich, one of Connecticut's oldest towns, boasted a rich history and culture. Situated just a 50-minute train ride away from New York City, this coastal town offered a delightful blend of New England charm and vibrant city life. The members of the Belhaven community were renowned for their wealth and influence, making it all the more shocking that such a privileged society could harbor dark secrets. Martha Elizabeth Moxley, a social butterfly, was known for her outgoing and fun-loving nature. Born on August 16, 1960, to Dorothy and John David Moxley, Martha was the youngest member of the family, alongside her older brother John. In 1974, Martha's father was transferred from his job in Piedmont, California, prompting the family to uproot and settle in a spacious mansion in Connecticut, thousands of miles away from their previous home in the affluent suburbs of Belhaven. While this transition may have been significant, Martha quickly adapted to her new surroundings. In no time at all, she formed numerous friendships at school, as her classmates were drawn to her vibrant personality and self-assurance. In just a span of 9 months, Martha managed to become the most popular girl at Western Junior High School. Her popularity extended to the boys as well, making her quite famous. Martha was a remarkable individual who seemed to have it all. She was known for her friendly nature, athletic abilities, and artistic talents. Everything seemed to come effortlessly to her. Her brother John described her as someone who was easy to get along with, positive, and someone you would enjoy being around. Despite her immense popularity, Martha remained grounded and family-oriented. She would often spend her time at home, either sketching or playing with her beloved cat, Tiger. However, like any other teenager, Martha also had a wild side. During the summer of 1975, she would spend most of her days at the Belle Haven Club, engaging in activities like tennis and swimming. She would socialize with children from exclusive clubs who were considered to be of a different class. Unlike her other friends, these children attended private academies and boarding schools and enjoyed a level of wealth that even surpassed Greenwich standards. Among these children, the Skakel family stood out, as they were cousins to the infamous Kennedys. Martha had a close connection with the Skakel boys, Thomas and Michael. The Skakels were neighbors to the Moxley family, and Thomas and Michael were nephews of Ethel Skakel and Robert F. Kennedy. The families were related, with Robert being the brother of the late President John F. Kennedy, Ethel Skakel's brother, Rushton, and his wife, and had 7 children, including Thomas and Michael, who were 17 and 15 years old, respectively, at the time of Martha's murder in 1975. However, the Skakel family was far from harmonious. Michael Skakel later attributed chronic illness, alcoholism, and a repressive Catholic upbringing as ongoing sources of turmoil within the household. In 1973, and Skakel passed away due to brain cancer, leaving her husband Rushton Skakel, who struggled with alcoholism, spiral further into a state of despair. With insufficient supervision and unlimited funds, Rushton would frequently leave their children home alone. As a result of his mother's death, Michael Skakel expressed that their household descended into an even more chaotic state. Interestingly, the Moxleys lived just about 150 yards away from the Skakels. Due to the lack of parental supervision, the Skakel household became a popular gathering spot for teenagers. Meanwhile, Martha was enjoying her summer days within the secure confines of the gated community in Belle Haven. Her teenage years were filled with occasional rebellious acts such as sneaking out, smoking, and indulging in a few beers. In her diary, Martha documented several incidents that occurred during these holidays, many of which revolved around the Skakel brothers. Martha was particularly concerned about the advances she received from Thomas. On September 12, 1975, she wrote, "Dear Diary, me, Jackie, Michael, Thomas, Hope, Maureen, and Andra were driving in Tom's car. I was practically sitting on Thomas's lap because I was only steering. He kept placing his hands on my knee. Then I took over driving again and Tom put his arm around me. He continued to engage in such behavior." Additionally, on September 19, 1975, Martha made a note about Michael stating, "Michael was so completely out of it that he acted like a real jerk with his words and actions. He kept insisting that I was leading Tom on, even though I only see him as a friend. I told him, well, what about you and Jackie? You keep saying you don't like her, yet you're all over her. He fails to understand that he can be kind to her without being overly affectionate." It was evident that Martha had conflicting emotions about the Skakel brothers and often questioned whether she should continue spending time at their place. The uncertainty regarding her own safety and comfort weighed heavily on her mind. However, no one could have anticipated the events that would unfold next. On the 30th of October in 1975, the mischief hour commenced. Martha made every effort to persuade her mother to allow her to go out with her friends. Martha's father, John, was away on a business trip, leaving her with the opportunity to employ various tactics to gain her mother's approval. After persistent pleading, Dorothy finally succumbed to her daughter's request and granted her permission to go out for the night. Belle Haven, the community they resided in, was known for its high level of security. Every individual entering or leaving the area was thoroughly inspected, making it highly improbable for any crimes to occur within such a safe locality. Martha ventured out with her friends Jackie, Jeffrey, and Helen, heading towards the Skakels' residence where they were scheduled to meet with their Kennedy cousins. As the night progressed, midnight approached. Dorothy was accustomed to her daughter occasionally missing her curfew, so her concern did not arise until 2:00 a.m. Initially, she assumed that Martha might have stayed over at her friend's house. In an attempt to locate her, Dorothy contacted Martha's best friend Sheila, only to discover that she had not seen Martha since 9:30 p.m., around the same time when all the children had returned home. By 3:30 a.m., Dorothy was consumed with worry and decided to reach out to their neighbor, Thomas Skakel, who provided the same response as Sheila. At 3:35 a.m., Dorothy reluctantly gave up and contacted the police for assistance. The local Greenwich officers promptly arrived at the Moxley residence. After conducting a thorough search of the neighborhood alongside Dorothy, they found no signs of anything amiss. The officers reassured Dorothy and advised her to wait until morning. However, before departing, they disseminated Martha's information to nearby stations, urging them to remain vigilant for any sightings of her. Exhausted, Dorothy eventually fell asleep by the window, anxiously awaiting her daughter's return. The following morning, on October 31st, 1975, Dorothy hurriedly entered Martha's room, only to discover that her bed was empty. The authorities were once again summoned, and an unsettling sense of unease began to envelop her. She had a gut feeling that something was amiss. Dorothy refused to simply wait idly, so she made the decision to venture around the neighborhood accompanied by her son, John. The first place they decided to search was the Skakel residence. Despite living next door for 15 months, Dorothy had never set foot inside her neighbor's home. As she approached, their aggressive dog greeted her, leaving her quite shaken. Gathering her courage, she knocked on the door, and Michael, the younger Skakel brother, promptly answered. Dorothy inquired about Martha's whereabouts, but Michael informed her that Martha was not present and appeared to be in poor health. In fact, Dorothy suspected he might be hungover. Undeterred, Dorothy was determined to find some clue. She requested permission to inspect the camper parked outside, as she speculated that Martha might have fallen asleep there. However, her hopes were dashed when she discovered the camper to be empty. By this time, news of Martha's disappearance had spread throughout the community, prompting friends, neighbors, and the police to gather at Bellhaven to search the premises. Shortly after noon, Martha's friend Sheila arrived at the Moxley household, trembling with fear, struggling to find the words to describe what she had just witnessed. Through tear-filled eyes, Sheila implored Martha's mother to call 911 for assistance. She revealed that something terrible had occurred, and Martha was unresponsive. Someone had attacked her, and immediate help was needed. Dorothy's companion, Jean, urged her to remain where she was while he investigated the situation. Upon reaching the scene, Jean made a horrifying discovery. Lying face down beneath the towering pine tree at the edge of the Motley property, 200 feet away from her house, was the missing teenager. The back of her head had been brutally bludgeoned and a broken golf club protruded from the back of her neck. Martha's attire was stained with blood, and her jeans and undergarments were pulled down to her ankles. Adjacent to the young girl lay a shattered 6-iron golf club, which had been repeatedly used to strike her head. The force of the blows was so intense that the club broke into 3 separate pieces, scattered across the ground near her lifeless body, except for the grip of the handle. The law enforcement officials were taken aback by the gruesome discovery. In the past 3 decades, Greenwich had not encountered a violent crime of this magnitude, let alone something as atrocious as this. The local police were ill-equipped to handle the severity of the situation at hand. Consequently, a team from the Connecticut County Station was assigned to conduct a thorough investigation. The forensic experts diligently collected as much evidence as possible from the crime scene, while Martha's body was sent for autopsy. The examination revealed no signs of sexual assault, with the primary cause of death being attributed to the blunt force trauma to her head. It was later revealed that Martha Moxley had remained a virgin until her untimely demise. As the investigation progressed, the local police officers in Greenwich began compiling alibis from all known witnesses in order to establish an accurate timeline of events surrounding the homicide. The Skakel brothers were the first individuals on their list. Both boys were interrogated on the same day, during which they provided their respective alibis for the time of the murder. When questioned, Thomas Skakel informed the detectives that he had last seen Martha around 9:30 p.m. outside his residence. He claimed to have immediately gone inside after bidding her farewell, where he joined the family's new live-in tutor, Kenneth Littleton, to watch the movie The French Connection. Thomas later returned to his room to work on a school report about Abraham Lincoln, although his teachers denied assigning such a task. Eventually, Thomas underwent 2 polygraph tests. The first test yielded inconclusive results, but he successfully passed the second one. Michael Skakel informed detectives that he left his residence at approximately 9:15 p.m. and drove to his cousin Jimmy's house, returning around 11 o'clock p.m. The police harbored some doubts regarding Michael's account, but lacked concrete evidence to label him as a suspect in the case. 24-year-old Kenneth Littleton was also under investigation in the autumn of 1976. He informed the authorities that he heard noises outside the house between 9:30 and 10 o'clock p.m. Littleton mentioned that before going outside, he checked on all 7 Skakel children, noting that Michael, his older brother Thomas, and 2 other Skakel boys were not present at home during that time. Detective Salmon's reports indicated that Littleton heard rustling leaves and noises from the bushes on the property, although he did not witness anything at that moment. Littleton stated that he only saw Thomas at 10:25 p.m. when he joined him in front of the TV. The other Skakel boys returned home within half an hour. Littleton claimed to be unaware of Martha Moxley's identity, as it was his first night at the Skakels' residence. Despite failing multiple lie detector tests, Littleton was never formally charged in connection to the case. During the ongoing investigation, the police discovered 2 significant pieces of evidence. Martha Moxley had been beaten and stabbed with a Tony P. golf club engraved with the initials of the Skakel family member. Upon inspection, the same set of golf clubs was found at the Skakel household, with 1 club missing. Rushton Skakel, their father, who had returned from a hunting trip upon learning of Martha's murder, initially cooperated with the authorities but later ceased communication with them. On January 22, 1976, the Skakel family, following their attorney's advice, declined to respond to further inquiries and terminated their cooperation with the investigators. Martha's friends provided alibis that raised numerous questions. On the night of October 30, 1975, Martha Moxley joined her friends for Mischief Night, a neighborhood tradition involving pranks like ringing bells and toilet papering houses. According to her friends, Martha was seen flirting with Thomas, the oldest Skakel brother, and moments later, they found her kissing him. One of her friends mentioned seeing Martha and Thomas near the pool in Skakel's backyard, behind the fence around 9:30 p.m. Over the next few months, the detective conducted more than 200 scheduled interviews. All interviewees underwent multiple polygraph exams as part of the investigation process. Donald Brown, the state's attorney for Fairfield County at the time of Martha's murder, stated that while individuals are not obligated to cooperate with the police, it is unusual for someone possessing information about a violent crime to withhold it from investigators. Initially, the case went cold for nearly 2 decades due to a lack of information. However, in 1991, a rumor linking another Kennedy family member, William Smith Kennedy, to the murder led to the reopening of Martha Moxley's case. Although William's connection to the case was eventually dismissed, this development sparked new leads and reignited the investigation. In the same year, renowned forensic pathologist Dr. Henry Lee was brought in by the police. Dr. Lee utilized advanced technology that was not available in 1975. Dr. Lee examined various items, including clothes found in the Skakel garbage shortly after the murder. He discovered hairs in the fibers, some of which were microscopically similar to the victim's hair, while others were merely similar. Dr. Lee concluded that the hair belonged to a Caucasian male. However, the investigators faced a challenge as they did not possess any hair samples from the potential suspects, making it impossible to establish a match. Nevertheless, Dr. Lee managed to provide a potential motive for Martha's murder by studying the crime scene photographs. He noted that the blood smear on her body indicated an attempt to use force, suggesting a sexually motivated homicide. This revelation led to Michael quickly becoming the primary suspect in the case. Rushton Skakel, in an attempt to clear his family's name, allegedly hired a private investigator. He hoped that this would shift suspicion onto other suspects, particularly former suspect Kenneth Littleton. Unfortunately for him, this plan backfired. Private investigators Jim Murphy, a former FBI agent, and his assistant Willis Billy Krebs, a former NLNPD lieutenant, became involved in the Martha Moxley case. During their interviews with Tom and Michael Skakel regarding their activities on the night of the murder, it was revealed that both boys had lied to the police. Thomas Skakel admitted that he had last seen Martha outside his house closer to 10 o'clock p.m., not 9:30 p.m. Additionally, Thomas and Martha engaged in inappropriate activity outside his home before he went back inside. According to Krebs, Thomas became emotional and started crying while confessing this. His lawyer interrupted before he could say more. Meanwhile, Michael Skakel informed the investigator that he did not go to bed upon returning home from his cousin's house around 11 o'clock p.m. Instead, he had climbed a tree outside Martha Moxley's bedroom window and engaged in inappropriate activity. Author and journalist Dominic Dunn obtained the investigator's report and passed him on to State Inspector Frank Garr, who had previously worked as a detective on the case. Despite sharing his suspicions about Michael Skakel earlier, lack of information led to dismissal. This report provided new momentum to this theory. Leonard Levitt, an investigative reporter, covered the Moxley case in 1982 and also had a similar theory about Michael. He pointed out the absence of defense wounds, suggesting that the victim knew of her attacker. Levitt believed that the repeated blows with the golf club indicated a crime of passion, implying a personal connection between the two. Levitt waited 20 years to report on Martha Moxley. The report revealed that both Thomas and Michael Skakel had made shocking admissions to the detectives. They confessed to lying to the police about their whereabouts on the night of the murder. Thomas claimed to have spent time with Martha after 9:30, engaging in a sexual act, before leaving her around 10 o'clock. Levitt emphasized the inconsistencies in Thomas's story. In 1998, a one-man grand jury and an investigator were tasked with reviewing Martha Moxley's case. After examining the evidence, Judge George N. Thim concluded that there were sufficient grounds to charge Michael Skakel with her murder. Michael faced trial for Martha's murder in his late 30s, finally receiving justice after nearly 2 decades. He was convicted based on circumstantial evidence presented during the 3-week trial. Investigators have found a piece of the golf club, a 6-iron from a set that had belonged to Michael's mother. However, prosecutors lacked direct physical evidence linking Michael to the murder case. He insisted he was far away from the crime scene at his cousin's house, watching Monty Python's Flying Circus. Nevertheless, jurors later stated they were swayed by his incriminating statements and erratic behavior. Several former classmates of Skanko testified during the trial. While at Elon School, a facility for troubled youths, Michael reportedly confessed to them about Martha's murder. One former schoolmate, Gregory Coleman, testified in a pretrial hearing in June 2000 that Skakel had told him, "I'm going to get away with murder. I am a Kennedy." Coleman also mentioned that Michael had claimed he tried to make advances towards a girl who did not reciprocate, leading him to commit the crime. However, Coleman passed away in August 2001 due to a heroin overdose and did not testify during Michael's murder trial in 2002. Michael had a troubled past, with rumors circulating about his time at Elon School. Despite the school owner's denial of any confession, numerous witnesses supported the claim. 2 former classmates from Elon School, including John D. Higgins, came forward as witnesses during the trial. Higgins described Michael's confession as tearful, dazed, and fragmented, with Michael only recalling bits and pieces of the crime. Gregory Coleman, the other witness, stated that Michael confidently declared he would escape punishment for Martha's murder due to his family name. Following Michael Skakel's imprisonment in August 2002, his cousin, Robert Kennedy Jr., became a staunch advocate for him. Kennedy firmly believed that his cousin was innocent and being falsely implicated for political reasons. In his interview with CBS 48 Hours, Kennedy expressed his certainty, saying, "I know Michael Skakel, and I know he didn't commit this crime." In 1997, Michael Skakel collaborated with ghostwriter Richard Hoffman to write his autobiography titled Dead Man Talking: A Kennedy Cousin Comes Clean. During the trial, a particular recording played proved to be highly incriminating. Michael admitted that on the night of Martha's murder, he was intoxicated, had consumed marijuana, and experienced inappropriate urges. When Dorothy Moxley arrived at his door the next morning, Skakel panicked. He confessed on the recording, "I was still under the influence from the previous night, a bit intoxicated, and worried if he had been seen." Michael claimed he was concerned about being caught by anyone from the Moxley household. Prosecutors argued that Michael's reference to engaging in inappropriate acts was actually him admitting to beating Martha with a golf club. Michael's defense countered by highlighting the lack of physical evidence against him in presenting an alibi for the time of Martha's murder. Nevertheless, the prosecution portrayed Michael as a jealous teenager during the trial. They argued that his rejection by Martha, combined with his drug and alcohol use and access to the murder weapon, led him to act on his violent thoughts. On June 7, 2002, the jury delivered a guilty verdict, resulting in Skakel's sentencing to 20 years to life in prison. The jury and state superior court revealed their decision just after 10:30 a.m., following the commencement of its fourth day of deliberations. Russian Skakel seemed almost shocked as the foreman declared the verdict in the crowded, silent courtroom. The public celebrated the justice served. This case was one of the most intricate and sorrowful in the Northeast, enveloped in a whirlwind of affluence and fame. The 27 years of torment finally came to an end for the Moxley family. Outside the courthouse, Mrs. Moxley confronted a large crowd of reporters and television crews. Through tears, she mentioned that she had prayed before entering the court. "My prayer began with, 'Dear Lord, once again today, just like I have been doing for 27 years. I prayed that I could attain justice for Martha,' she expressed. This entire ordeal was about Martha," she continued. "Today belongs to Martha. This is truly Martha's day." While Michael was incarcerated, his legal team and supporters fought for the annulment of his conviction. Four appeals were submitted, all of which were rejected. Then, on October 23, 2013, Michael was granted a new trial due to the inadequate representation provided by his defense attorney, Mickey Sherman. Consequently, Skakel was released on $1.2 million bail on November 21, 2013. Prosecutors strived to reinstate Skakel's conviction. They eventually succeeded in December 2016, when the Connecticut Supreme Court ruled with a 4-3 decision, affirming the validity of his representation. However, the case did not conclude there. In May 2018, the court overturned its ruling with another 4-3 decision, determining that Michael's attorney, Mickey Sherman, failed to present evidence of Michael's alibi during the initial trial. Prosecutors still retain the option to retry Michael, although they will likely encounter challenges due to deceased witnesses and other issues. Michael's legal team, in a release statement, commended the court's decision, stating that it was the right course of action. The lawyers have also stated that Michael, who maintains his innocence, has been wrongly incarcerated. However, the Moxleys remain steadfast in their belief of Michael's guilt. "I have no doubt in my mind that he is responsible," Dorothy asserted. John Moxley, her 59-year-old son, expressed that the jury's decision in the 2002 trial, reached after considering the evidence against Michael Skakel, continues to provide him with reassurance. "We have a sense of comfort knowing what transpired," he stated. Currently 55 years old, Michael Skakel resides with his aunt in Westchester County, New York. He spends his days caring for his 15-year-old son, George, and striving to move forward from the trauma of his past conviction and imprisonment. He is legally obligated to seek permission from the court to travel outside of Connecticut or New York. "I wish to leave this nightmare behind so that I can start building a life with George without this constant burden," he expressed in an email. "I lost 11.5 years of my life. I missed out on George's entire childhood. I know I can never reclaim those years, but I consider myself fortunate to be able to spend time with George now." The death of Martha Moxley haunted the Greenwich community, her family, and friends for over 40 agonizing years. While many still believe that the verdict against Michael was fabricated, ultimately, a mother lost her daughter, and the state of Connecticut failed to deliver proper justice for Martha's death. Numerous individuals believe that Michael evaded punishment due to his connections and wealth. Martha's father, John David Moxley, fought for his daughter's justice until his death in 1988. Even to this day, the Kennedy family continues to be associated with the Martha Moxley case. Robert F. Kennedy Jr., who authored the book, framed why Michael Skakel spent over a decade in prison for a murder he didn't commit in 2016, left Dorothy Moxley, Martha's 84-year-old mother, speechless with his publication. She mentioned that truth had never appeared so distorted and manipulated in her entire life. Despite this, she remained convinced that Michael was responsible for her child's death. Kennedy's book dedicated a whole chapter to tarnishing John's character, Martha's father. He cast doubt on his whereabouts on the night of the murder and made several accusations against the Moxley family. As of December 2019, Michael Shacko is still a free man. The memory of Martha Moxley is forever engraved in the hearts of Greenwich residents. A young, beautiful girl was robbed of her innocence before she could fully blossom into adulthood. This is not the first tragedy that has been swept under the rug by the Kennedy family. The legal battle between Michael and the Moxley family was a nationwide conflict, and while there are still many unanswered questions surrounding this case, we offer our sincerest condolences to the family of the victim. Laurel in Yellowstone County, Montana is a place described as scenic and rural on the outskirts with gorgeous hiking routes, camping spots and lakes, and busy, bustling and vibrant at the center with something always going on. Parades and small festivals, great shops and restaurants, and a big sense of community spirit. Just over 7,000 people lived there, and in 2019 one of those people was 57-year-old Lori Bray. Lori worked as a runner in one of the local casinos and by all accounts lived a peaceful and quiet life, keeping to herself and just enjoying being at home with her two rescue dogs, Mac and Nikki. She was from a big and close family. She had a son called Justin, who she never went a day without talking to, 5 grandchildren, lots of brothers and sisters, and 8 nieces and nephews. Lori was an animal lover, especially dogs. And as well as Mac and Nikki, she would donate to rescue centers and charities and would often look after other dogs before they found permanent homes. Her boss and former roommate Kathy said Lori was probably the sweetest, kindest, and most gentle person. She said she was softly spoken, with a beautiful spirit and a welcoming smile, happy to help anyone and always someone people could turn to. For her son Justin said this could sometimes be a double-edged sword and she could be too trusting of people, never seeing the bad in anyone, even when they gave her a reason to question them. September 30th, 2019 was a fairly typical day. Lori had been working the closing shift at the Cedar Ridge Casino, and just before midnight, she clocked off, locked up and left, heading straight back home as she was back in early the next day. Several hours later, October 1st, 8:30 a.m., employees at the casino noticed that Lori was unusually a no-show, but she hadn't phoned in to say why. Around the same time, her boss Kathy was driving into work herself, down an empty and secluded road, with nothing to see but fields for miles. She spotted what she thought looked like Lori's car. It was parked at an odd angle on an intersection, and it didn't look like anyone was inside. Lori didn't even live close to this area, and with no shops or other houses around, it made no sense for her or her car to be there. Kathy pulled over but kept her distance and didn't get much closer to the car, instead deciding to call Justin. She asked him to go to his mother's house, wondering if she was just panicking unnecessarily. But little did she know, independently from her call, Justin also thought something felt odd about that morning. He hadn't received his usual morning call from his mother, which was strange. Justin headed to her house, ringing her phone as he did so, but the silence was deafening. When he got there, he noticed her car was not parked outside, making the knot in his stomach tighten further. He let himself in and was alarmed to find her 2 dogs, and Nikki, unattended with no signs of being fed, which he knew his mother would never let happen. A look around her house turned up nothing. Her bed was neatly made. There was no indication that breakfast had been eaten that morning, and everything just felt eerily quiet. Whereas it was possible Lori had made the bed and washed everything up before leaving, it felt more like she hadn't actually made it home from the previous night. He called Kathy back and they both agreed to go and check out the car together. Confirmed right away that it was his mother's 2003 Chrysler sedan. The sunroof was open, a handle and indicator were broken, and inside the floor on the back he could see her purse and her car keys. Her iPhone was also on the floor, lighting up as it was receiving calls. Although Justin wanted to open the car and start properly looking, he knew in his guts that this was a job for the police and no one else. They called 911. When authorities started inspecting Lori's car, they found bloodstains covering more than half of the seat in the back, and there was a muddy shoe impression on the passenger's side door. They also found Lori's clothes scattered about too, including her underwear, which appeared damaged as if they had been forcefully removed. The hooks on her bra were bent and some of the clothing had blood on it as well. It was all pointing towards a violent and troubling scene having taken place. Lori Bray was now a missing person. Everyone sprung into action, many in the community knowing her well and wanting to help. Friends started posting on social media, with one person typing, "She would never leave her dogs. They are her world. Someone has to know something. No lead is too small, and I ask that everyone please pray that she is found safe." People started organizing their own search parties as well, and everyone was out and looking for Lori. It was instantly a case that captured the media as well as the public, as it was just so unusual for something like this to happen in this area. The place where her car had been found was grassy, muddy, and the field seemed to go on forever, so looking for clues in a location like this was a big undertaking. Given the terrain, the searches were difficult anyway, but as the darkness started to creep in, things became impossible. Authorities told the volunteers to stop and wait until morning, which people reluctantly did. Police asked Kathy for the camera footage from inside the casino. She was not only able to give it to them, she was also able to say who most of the people were and give them their details, so they could start interviewing them. On the night she had last been seen, Lori had been closing down as usual, restocking, cleaning, and the likes. Two women briefly started talking to her at the bar, and Kathy said she knew them, they were regulars. Another person then popped up who worked with one of the women. Kathy said his name was Diego Hernandez. Diego ordered a drink, and Lori asked to check his ID before serving him. A few minutes later, Lori could be seen pointing out the clock to him, indicating the casino was closing and he needed to leave. There was a very brief conversation before Lori carried on with the closed-down duties. At 11:20 p.m., Lori grabbed her bag, locked the door, and headed out. The casino was now closed and her car was parked just in view of one of the doors. She briefly walked back for a second, seemingly to talk to somebody, before getting into her vehicle with someone. Police quickly established it was 22-year-old Diego in the car, and at the time he got into the passenger side, he was the only person apart from Lori still on the premises. Not a single other soul was around. Detectives needed to know why he had left with her and if he had seen or heard anything that night, perhaps another customer that may have been lingering or acting oddly. Just before midnight on October 1st, Diego Hernandez was found at his address. He confirmed it was him on the cameras, and the Lori had very kindly offered to give him a lift home after they got chatting in the casino. He said he only went to the casino on a whim because he could get free drinks there. He arrived at about 9 p.m. and stayed for a couple of hours using a few machines and chatting to people. Diego said Lori drove him to his house. He said thank you and goodbye, and then he went to meet up with a friend, ready to carry on the party. He said he hadn't seen Lori since he watched her drive away, and it was simply a passing encounter and a kind gesture from a stranger. But there was something that was sounding out to police that they couldn't ignore. Diego's face, hands, and torso were covered with fresh scratches. One officer asked about this, saying it looked like someone had fought him off and that it was a little concerning. But Diego said the scratches had happened 2 days before when he got into a fight with a friend called Nick after going to a local strip club. He said Nick had a ring on and it had cut his face. He was very matter-of-fact and calm, confident in what he was saying, and showed no signs of being dishonest. With this, the police left. They found Nick and he admitted they had had a scuffle in his car. He said that Diego had suddenly started freaking out and was agitated. Nick said that at one point he had put Diego in a headlock before pushing him out of the vehicle, but he said there was no scratching involved and he was shocked to see the state of his face. He had no reason to lie. He had already admitted to pushing him about and kicking him out of the vehicle, but the scratches were simply not linked to this incident. Despite what Nick had said, which did match parts of Diego's story, the fact was police had no other leads apart from him. Diego was still the last known person to have been with Lori, and by his own admission was in her car. The CCTV from Cedars Casino couldn't confirm whether the scratches were there at the time, but more footage from another bar just hours before showed that he had absolutely no marks on his face at all. Early on the 2nd of October, the search party started back up and continued throughout the day. But at 7:30 p.m., detectives received the call that they had been dreading. A man had been out riding his ATV in a wooded area when he made an awful discovery. He had found the body of a woman lying naked on the ground. He didn't have to get close to tell that she was badly beaten and already dead. Police felt strongly they knew exactly who it would be, but made no announcements. However, just as word had traveled about Lori being missing, it was now traveling that an area was swarming with police and forensics, and soon it was confirmed. They had found the body of Lori Bray just under 2 miles from where her car had been dumped. She was at the bottom of a ditch, completely naked and in the fetal position. She was covered in abrasions and bruising. There was blood in her nose and in her hair, swelling around both of her eyes. She had a swollen lip and several broken ribs. Her cause of death was later confirmed as strangulation, but the examiner noted she had also suffered blunt force trauma to the face. A sexual assault kit was used, and although blood was found, no semen was. Some of the marks on her body indicated she had either been dragged down the hill or pushed down it, not that she had been killed there. They now knew that she had probably been killed inside her own car and then transported there. Near to her body was her little necklace with a cross on it, and close to this was a fairly good imprint of a shoe. This print appeared to match the print found inside Lori's car. Lori's death and the state she had been found in was shocking. Officers said the level of violence and brutality was astonishing, commenting that whoever had done this was, put simply, a monster. Colleagues and friends were at a loss as to who would want to do this. They said Lori was loved by the regulars, had a great reputation in the community, and had never spoken about having any issues with anybody. Police did get a couple more potential leads when it came to light that she had been involved in some abusive and controlling relationships in the past, and maybe these men needed to be looked into. But Lori's exes, for various reasons, were completely ruled out. The once so tight community was now broken and scared, fearing that this might not be an isolated incident, and maybe something could happen to someone else. One of the residents described Lori's death as profound and detrimental to the community as a whole. Nevertheless, everybody put their worry aside to come together for Lori's family and friends, raising money to help look after her dogs, support Justin, and donate towards the funeral costs. The police were able to find several locations where Lori's phone had pinged between midnight and 3 a.m. The casino was one where her car was found and where her body was found, and one near to Diego's house. Diego's house and that surrounding area had pinged just before the location where she was found at, by which point she would have already been killed, and this was pretty damning evidence. More interesting still, while he was in the other bar in the hours before he was at the casino, he spent the evening pressuring random women to drive him home, including the lady working behind the bar. She refused several times and said she felt very uncomfortable with his harassing behavior. On October 4th, detectives executed a search warrant at Diego's residence. They collected the clothes he was seen wearing that night, some of which looked like they had been bleached as well as freshly washed. This stood out immediately, as his room was full of dirty laundry. They also found a pair of soaking wet Nike shoes that had also just been washed. The tread of the shoes matched the print that was found inside Lori's car and near to her body. Detectives started going through Diego's phone, and it turned out that just a couple of hours after Lori had been killed, he made some interesting searches online. How long do investigations last? How long do FBI investigations last? Is there a limit to how many years they can investigate someone? He went to the station and gave the authorities a DNA sample, and then, after this, he changed his story. He said that he and Lori had spent some time talking in the car and they were getting on well. They then smoked some cigarettes and ended up having sex near his home. But he swore he hadn't seen her after that. Officers still didn't have enough to hold him, so he was allowed to go home. Everything was processed quickly, and before long, they had everything they needed. Diego's DNA was a match to the DNA found on Lori's body and under her fingernails. Diego was called back in, where he would change his story for a final time. He was now claiming that he and Lori had actually been in a relationship for over a year, and they were just keeping it a secret, and that was why he had lied so much. She always wanted to keep it quiet, but at the same time, I don't know how to explain it. But every time that me and her had a relationship under profile, she always told me, she said, to keep it quiet. Like nobody needs to know about this, he said. But detectives went back over a year on both of their phones, and there was no evidence to suggest they had ever even talked before. This was corroborated by the casino cameras that showed Lori asking for his ID and only talking to him to tell him they were closing. Their phones had never made contact or been in the same locations until that night. On October 8th, just a week after Lori Bray was reported missing, Diego Hernandez was placed under arrest in connection with her death. 2 days later, he was charged with deliberate homicide. This came as such a shock to everybody in the area. Diego was well known and well liked. He always seemed polite, friendly, and quite quiet. His friends said he was down to earth and genuine, and this had left them blindsided. The police's theory was this: given all the CCTV that seemed to show Lori getting into the car with him willingly and not under duress, indicated that Lori had offered to give him a lift home, as he had originally said, likely feeling sorry for him given how late it was. Once near his house, Diego had attempted to initiate something sexual and Lori refused. A struggle then broke out and he viciously attacked, sexually assaulted, and eventually strangled her. And the reason he was leading with the claim the pair had had consensual sex was because he knew the second his DNA was taken they would make the link, so decided to change the narrative. Diego would never say what happened and what if any conversations took place, but he denied ever harming her. As word started to spread that an arrest had been made, a vigil for Lori was held in her favorite park to walk her dogs. Money was still being raised and a lot of people were donating to the charities she once did so much for. Diego Hernandez pleaded not guilty, and the now 24-year-old's trial began in March of 2021. He was maintaining his innocence and still claiming the pair were in a secret relationship, something which angered her family and friends, as they said this was simply not true. In opening statements, Diego's defense attorney suggested that Lori's abandoned car may have been disturbed or contaminated before being searched by law enforcement, which meant the evidence in it had to be questioned. And she mentioned that methadone was found in her system, something she did not have a prescription for. They put forward this to suggest if she was using methadone and not telling anyone, she could easily have been hiding a relationship with Diego, a theory the prosecution found ridiculous and nonsensical. The prosecution had a strong case and asked for DNA and forensic experts to testify. They said the DNA found in Lori's car, on her clothes and under her fingernails had a 1 in 60 octillion chance of matching someone other than Diego. An octillion is 1 followed by 27 zeros. They also confirmed that the trousers found in his home had been bleached just a few hours after Lori had died. They presented the phone data too, which also gave a clear timeline of which Diego was at the center. After several days, both sides rested their cases, and just 2 hours into their deliberations, the jury returned their verdict. Diego Hernandez was found guilty. Before he was sentenced, he asked to take the stand himself. Things then took a sharp turn that nobody was expecting. The man who had been denying anything violent had happened for well over a year sat down and said, "I did it. I killed Lori." The room was stunned. The judge said he had never seen this happen in his 4 decades in a courtroom. That day, Diego Hernandez was sentenced to life in prison with a minimum of 35 years to serve before he could be considered for parole. There is no indication whether or not he has made plans to appeal. Lori Bray's case deeply affected many people, those that knew her well and those that had never met her before. The community felt a collective sense of loss, and one resident said it really changed a lot about the closeness and safeness everybody had always felt. They had all lost a really special person. Kathy said of Lori, "There's nothing she wouldn't do for anybody, even if it caused a hardship on her. She was just a very tender, loving soul. No matter what anybody did, she saw the good in everybody." Cape Lafern is a small, beautiful, and picturesque village near Folkestone, Kent, in the southeast of England. Surrounded by stunning natural beauty, sweeping landscapes, sea views, and filled with friendly locals, it really is an idyllic place to live. People travel there for a quiet slice of country and seaside living, taking in all that it has to offer. Described by those that live there as safe and with a strong sense of community, everybody really does know everybody and looks out for and after each other. One spring night in April 2013, this little community would be left rocked by one of the most brutal murders that Kent has ever seen. Just 10 minutes away from Cape Loopham lies Aycliffe, home to 30-year-old Michael Kerr, who lived there with his family. Life hadn't always been easy for Michael. When he was born, the birthing process had been very quick and doctors described him as a really poorly baby, giving him just a 30% chance of surviving the night. But despite the odds being stacked against him, he did. Doctors told his parents, Patricia and Jim, that Michael would likely never be able to walk. But on his third birthday, he stood up and ran across the room. Doctors said he would never be able to ride a bike. So Patricia went out and bought him one, and before long he was out on his bike all the time and there was no stopping him, showing once again that he could defy people's expectations. He attended harbor school in Dover, and when he was 6 years old, Michael was diagnosed with Fragile X syndrome, a genetic condition that can cause a variety of developmental delays. But just 3 years later, when he was 9, doctors dismissed this diagnosis. His mother would later say that she was certain Michael had cerebral palsy. He never let anything hold him back, and he soon grew up into a happy and funny little boy who was always full of life. Patricia said that he had a cheeky grin and a mischievous personality. He had a slight stammer when he spoke and struggled with hand-eye coordination, but none of it stopped him from pursuing his passions, one of which was music. Michael had big dreams and wanted to make it as a DJ. He loved nothing more than DJing for the clubs and pubs in the local area, playing a huge range of music that reflected his diverse tastes. After passing his driving test, Michael's love of cars and driving grew too, and he was over the moon to buy his first car, a Renault Clio, a motor he adored. He would often drive into Dover and offer folks rides home for petrol money when the pubs had taken their last orders. He was always looking to help and make sure people got home safe, especially the young female pub and club goers. This kind-hearted and giving nature made him extremely popular and well-loved amongst the locals and the wider community. But his mother Patricia said that some would take advantage of his helpfulness and good nature, such as with him giving them lifts and money. And she also said that he didn't see the bad in people. Wednesday, April 10, 2013 Satmar Lane is a quiet and secluded country lane in Cape Loopham. It's surrounded by fields and ponds and has an embankment running along each side. It was here that a disturbing discovery was made. Patricia said that she had woken that morning feeling sick and anxious, nervous that something bad was going to happen. Then came the knock at the door that every parent dreads. She opened the door to a woman who asked if she was Michael Kerr's mother. She said that she was. The officer simply replied, "I'm sorry." Michael Kerr's body had been found at the end of Satmar Lane, a few yards away from his Renault Clio, that had been wedged up against the embankment. There were major wounds across his body and neck, and it was clear to the officers that they were dealing with a sadistic murder. It appeared that there had been an attempt to move his body, which was surrounded by a pool of blood, and there was also significant blood splatter in his car. His cousin Linda was away with the family in a little holiday village, and Michael was due to head down and join them. She then began receiving numerous calls and messages. It was then that she learned her beloved cousin had died. For those that knew him, they were in shock. Michael was loved by so many, and nobody could understand why anyone would want to hurt him. As news began to spread throughout the community, people could not believe that a crime this brutal and violent had happened. Police had swarmed Cape Loopham, and this quiet little part of the UK had been turned completely upside down. The murder had been a violent and incredibly frenzied one. Michael had been stabbed 10 times and had 11 slash wounds to his body. 2 of his teeth were also found underneath his body. Severe force had been used to smash them out of his mouth. He had defensive wounds, but they were few, meaning he had potentially been caught in unawares or lost so much blood in such a short space of time that it had left him physically unable to do anything. Detective Chief Superintendent Paul Fotheringham said that the police had decided to take the unusual step and asked a pathologist to come to the scene to carry out assessments and take samples as the body lay in situ, a decision that is only taken in the most serious of cases. But the pathologist was unable to make it, and the weather was beginning to turn. So a tent was erected around his body before he was taken away to the mortuary. The task that lay in front of the police officers was enormous. They needed to search all around the area for any clues that could lead them to what had happened and to whoever was responsible. A huge team of officers were searching the lane and divers were dispatched to search the ponds nearby. His phone was missing, but his wallet was still there and it didn't appear to have been touched, meaning it did not seem to be a robbery that had gone wrong, leaving them still hunting for a motive. Did his phone contain evidence that pointed to his killer, and was that why it was missing? Given the position of his Renault Clio, it seemed that someone had attempted to use his car to drive away from the scene of the crime, but abandoned it when they couldn't drive it over the bank. There were so many questions and so few answers. Rumors soon began to swirl within the local area. The port of Dover was not far away, with people coming into the country and going out of it all the time. Had this been an opportunistic killing by someone who wasn't even in the area anymore? Had he been ambushed? Had it been planned? The police needed to speak to people, including those that knew him best, so they could work out which theories to rule in and which to rule out. During their door-to-door inquiries, someone living in a house roughly 100 meters away from where his body had been found said that they had heard what appeared to be shouting and screams on the night he was killed, but said that it sounded more like people were having fun than someone in distress. As the search of the lane continued, they finally got their first big lead. Michael's phone that had been missing was found, smashed, seemingly stamped on, before being kicked into the hedge at the side of the road. It was quickly sent off to see if any clues could be gathered from it. They also needed to find the murder weapon. Whilst nothing was found in the search of the ponds or along the sides of the road, a search of the drains on the main road that Sat Marlene led off would be a different story. 2 knives were found, thrown down one of the drains. Did more than one weapon mean there was more than one killer? Several days after Michael's death, a memorial was held for him, with people turning out in droves to pay their respects. One of Michael's friends said it looked like all of Dover had turned up. Patricia was incredibly touched that so many had come together to honor her son and his memory. It was clear that he had meant so much to so many people and had highlighted just how loved and respected he was by those in his community. As the investigation into Michael Kerr's murder continued, there would be another huge breakthrough. Someone had called the police and asked that officers be sent to Clarendon Street in Dover as their friends had just confided in them with a shocking story. 5 people were arrested on suspicion of murder. They were all young adults in their 20s who lived together on Clarendon Street. All of them were taken to the station to be questioned and interviewed. 3 of them men aged 20, 22, and 27 would later be released without charge. The remaining 2 were not. 22-year-old Alicia Davis and 21-year-old Charlotte Carlson were kept in custody. Alicia Davis had been an air cadet and was originally from Aylsham. She had met Charlotte Carlson in the busy nightlife of Dover. The pair had moved in together 6 months before and lived on Clarendon Street. They were described as being well known within the local area and had reputations for drinking heavily. Charlotte explained to the interviewing officers that she had known Michael for roughly a year and that he had given her lifts home and also ferried her to the supermarket. Alicia had been introduced to him just a few weeks before his death. Michael's cousin Linda said she had seen them in his car and had also witnessed him going into a shop to purchase alcohol for them. During their interviews, they said that they had both met with him twice on the day he had been killed. They said that at around 8 in the evening, he had picked up Alicia and driven her to Satmar Lane where they stayed for a while, before he purchased alcohol and drove her back to Clarendon Street. They said that they had stayed home and drank, and Michael had then come back at around midnight. They said he had picked them both up, with Alicia in the passenger seat, and Charlotte sat in the back, and he had driven once again to Satmar Lane. Alicia then made a startling accusation. She said that Michael had raped and attacked her. She said in a bid to protect herself she had put her hands down the side of the car seat, where she found a knife and proceeded to stab him in self-defense. Charlotte said she had been asleep in the back and had woken up to Alicia stabbing him, adding that she had been unable to get out of the car as it had no doors for the back seats. She said that the pair had then attempted to move Michael's body and then drive away in his Renault, but the car had stalled, so they left it on Satmar Lane, proceeded to walk home, leaving Michael lying on his own, bleeding to death. The police needed to ascertain if their stories checked out and if the argument of self-defense was a plausible one. What was unusual was that the pair had no history of violence and had never had any run-ins with the law, so for them to be responsible for such a violent crime was shocking. The officer spoke to locals to try and gather CCTV footage, and Michael's car was caught driving past in the early morning hours, and mobile phone data analysis also confirmed this timeline. Mobile phone data also showed something that caught the eye of the police. Text messages had been sent between Alicia and Charlotte as the car had arrived in the village. The messages had been deleted. Charlotte said, "Start now." Alicia replied saying, "You're gonna have to do it first." Charlotte's last message read, "Shut up and hurry. Let's party." These messages were sent within 3 minutes of his Renault being caught on CCTV. This revelation blew huge holes in what Charlotte had said, that she had been asleep in the back and had no idea what was going on when she woke up. The knives that had been found also raised more questions with their story. When the house on Clarendon Street had been searched, there were 2 knife sets there. Both knives found in the drain were missing from said sets. The argument that the knife had been found down the side of the car seat and that she had killed him to stop him attacking her made no sense. It showed that the knives had been taken from the house they had lived in, and this coupled with the text messages showed that this had been a pre-planned and thought-out attack. The evidence against them continued to mount. A fire had been set in the back garden of the house on Clarendon Street, and items of clothing had been burned, including Charlotte's favorite gray hoodie that had blood on it. When the other residents of the house came home, they said they had been putting clothes into the washing machine which matched the clothes they had been wearing before the attempt to set them on fire was made. With all of the evidence stacking up against them, 22-year-old Alicia Davis and 21-year-old Charlotte Coulson were charged with the murder of Michael Kerr. Charlotte entered a plea of not guilty. Alicia didn't appear in court due to illness, but would also plead not guilty, and they were remanded in custody to await trial, where they would be tried together. Due to the severity and seriousness of the case, it was sent to the Old Bailey Courthouse in London for trial in December 2013. Judge Paul Worsley would preside. Before the judge and jury came into the courtroom, the pair would sit and laugh, seemingly unbothered by the seriousness of the situation. But when in the presence of both judge and jury, they would then sit with their heads down and not look up. They continued their story of self-defense. His cousin Linda said the accusation they had made showed how evil they were. This was a crime they had planned, and had then attempted to besmirch Michael's name to cover it up. The prosecution needed to knock holes in their defense, and Alicia's version of events needed to be shown to be false. The police and prosecution had Michael's beloved Renault Clio driven to the Old Bailey, where it was parked in the rear yard. The judge and jury were then invited to look at it. The car itself was very small, showing that her allegation of him undressing himself and taking her clothes off too before attacking her in such a tiny space made no sense. Prosecutor Sarah Woodhouse said, "There was never any rape, but they put their heads together and concocted a vicious story about Michael Kerr in order to exonerate themselves." Text messages from Charlotte's phone showed that she had messaged Michael's phone after he had been murdered, asking why they hadn't heard from him and why he had failed to pick them up when he said he would. Something Detective Chief Superintendent Paul Fotheringham said was a clear and deliberate attempt to both cover their tracks and misguide the police, allowing them to say that they hadn't seen him. Alicia had also messaged him saying, "I feel so sick. I love you." Charlotte's last message to him was sent to his phone at 5:47 a.m., and she told him she was unable to fall asleep. But Charlotte continued to maintain that she hadn't been involved. The 2 knives that were found would bring her defense into serious doubt. The injuries were all across his body, suggesting it had not been the work of one person. The judge agreed that Charlotte had been involved, and that she had been the one to cause the injuries to his neck, by grabbing his hair and chin from behind and cutting his throat several times. The knife wound that Alicia admitted to making showed that she had actually repositioned the knife after stabbing him to ensure that the stab wound would pierce his heart. Michael would not have stood a chance against them. Alicia's defense lawyer Paul Bogan said that she was currently being treated into psychiatric care and that she had suffered abuse at the hands of her father as a child. He did say, however, that she had committed a sustained, unrelenting, and particularly violent attack. Michael's heartbroken parents Jim and Patricia sat and quietly wiped away tears as the horrible details of what had happened to their son were laid bare. More would also come out about why they had met with him. He had been texting them frequently on the 9th of April and had been in regular contact with them in the hours before he died. Would say she had actually had sex with Michael for money and that Charlotte had been the one to organize it, as they needed 20 pounds for alcohol. Charlotte had sent Michael a message saying that Alicia would have sex with him if he paid her. The possible motive for why they had killed him began to emerge. Knowing that she had slept with him for money, with Michael being more vulnerable, it could have led him to believe he had a girlfriend and was in a relationship with Alicia. Detective Chief Superintendent Paul Fotheringham said that rather than explain to him that that was not what it was, they decided to kill him. After killing him, CCTV was shown to the court, proving that they had appeared to go about their night as normal, by later visiting a McDonald's and going to buy alcohol. As they returned home, they were heard laughing and joking with each other by neighbors. After hearing all of the evidence, the trial concluded after 3 weeks. And before long, the jury had returned its verdict. 22-year-old Alicia Davis and 21-year-old Charlotte Carlson were unanimously found guilty of the murder of Michael Kerr. The pair both burst into tears as the verdict was read out. Charlotte Carlson was sentenced to life in prison with a minimum term of 20 years. Alicia Davis received a sentence of life in prison with a minimum term of 25 years. Michael's devastated mother Patricia said that the pair should have received longer sentences. She said, "So many people have said an eye for an eye. I don't want that. No, I don't want them to die. Because in my head, every night when those lights are out, they see and they hear and they are haunted by what they did to my boy and it torments them." Judge Worsley told the pair, "You both set upon him. He was an easy victim. He inflicted no injuries on either of you and had defense wounds from trying to protect himself from the repeated slashing and stabbing. Rather than remorse or shock, you have felt some perverse pleasure in watching him die and were heard laughing as you traveled home along the road. Neither of you have shown any remorse. Your only desire is to save your own skins." He added he totally rejected the claim of rape and said that they had lied continuously to the police. His family said in a statement, "Michael was the innocent victim of a ruthless and brutal, unprovoked attack which has resulted in him being taken from his family and friends. The pain we have experienced and are still suffering from cannot be expressed in words. Today's verdict, whilst not bringing him back, has provided us with some comfort, knowing that those responsible for his death will serve a number of years in prison. However, no sentence can ever come close to the pain that Michael has endured. Michael Kerr was a loving, kind and gentle man who was always looking to help people in need, people he didn't even know. He had gone through so much but always looked on the bright side of life and brought joy to those around him. His death left a void that will never be filled for so many people, but they will forever carry with them the memories he created and the love that he gave." 25-year-old Benny Lynn Aquino was originally from the Philippines. She was incredibly popular, down to earth and much loved, with her sister Shella saying she didn't know anybody who disliked her. Benny Lynn had been keen to pursue her education and Shella had worked to support her while she went to school, as did their father Benedicto. The family came together to help her and ensure that she graduated. She was described as intelligent, kind, beautiful, and dependable. She cared deeply for her family and her brother said she would protect him from bullies. In 2015, she met a British man called Lexington Burke on a dating website. Her romance blossomed and after going out to the Philippines, the pair were married in a big wedding in Samar on the 28th of July, 2018. 1 month later, on the 19th of August, they welcomed their first child, a little girl called Jellica. On Jellica's first birthday, the family would relocate to the United Kingdom. It was the first time Benny Lynn had left the Philippines, and she was hopeful that there would be a bright future ahead of her in the UK. She worked hard in the UK and sent money back to her family in the Philippines to support them. Sadly, by the end of 2020, the marriage had started to fall apart and Benny Lim moved into emergency accommodation, a first-floor flat in Kingswood, 3 miles outside of Bristol. She made friends in her sheltered accommodation, like the Mums and Bath group who helped her by giving her food and other goods. Members of the group would visit her, as would her friends in Bristol, with people keen to show and give her as much support and love as possible. Even though their marriage had broken down, the couple had agreed to custody arrangements for Jellica. Towards the end of February 2021, Lexington had made several attempts to contact Benny Lynn, but he got no response. She wasn't replying to his text messages or answering his calls. He had posted a note through her letterbox, but this too had gone unanswered. The social work department had also contacted him to see if he had heard from her, as they had been unable to reach her and she had missed an appointment. This was totally out of character, and as he reached a point of extreme concern, he contacted the police, and Benny Lynn, Jellica, and another child who was 7 years old were reported missing on the 1st of March. It's important to note here that information on this case refers to this 7-year-old girl, but other news sources would later state that this was Benny Lynn's eldest daughter. No name or information has been given, as she cannot be legally identified and all steps must be taken to protect her identity. She will be referred to throughout this episode as Jane Doe. Avon and Somerset police launched an investigation and quickly uncovered a lead. A car had been traced driving into Gloucestershire around the time they had last been seen, before being driven back up north and over the border into Scotland. The driver was seen on CCTV filling up his car in a petrol station. The investigators reached out to the Scottish police for their assistance in finding the vehicle. The car was registered to a man called Andrew Innes, who had traveled down from Dundee to pick them up. Despite the time zone difference between the Philippines and the United Kingdom, Shella and Benny Lynn always found time to talk to each other and were in regular contact. Before the three of them had gone missing, on Thursday the 18th of February, Benny Lynn had been talking to her sister on a video call. Benny Lynn was in Andrew's car and they were all driving up to Scotland. Shella asked if she could see him, and Benny Lynn flipped the camera around and showed the man driving the car. There were no overnight bags. It was clear that this was not meant to be a long trip. A couple of days after she had arrived in Scotland, Shella had become concerned as Benny Lynn was no longer replying to her messages. On Saturday, the 20th of February, she sent Andrew 2 messages knowing that Benny Lynn was with him. "Hi, hello, sir. What happened to my sister?" The following day, she received a reply. "It's a little bit long story, but don't worry. She's perfectly fine." Shella messaged back, "What happened to my sister, sir? Please tell me." Andrew responded, "I met her on a dating website and we chatted for a long time. Then I went down to visit her." "Where is she now?" Shella asked. "She's in Glasgow. She didn't tell me her whole story before. I only found out last weekend. I thought she was divorced already, but it seems she wasn't 100% honest with me about that." He said he had dropped them at a cafe in Glasgow with another man she had met online, someone that he didn't know. He said that Benny Lynn had wanted to hide away at his property, as Lexington wanted custody of Jellica and wanted Benny Lynn thrown out of the country. He told Shella that Benny Lynn was safe and that he had advised her to discard her phone if she wanted to get away from the authorities. Shella begged to speak with Benny Lynn. He replied, "I expect she will get in touch with you once she gets settled down." Several more messages went back and forth. Shella said, "Sir, can you tell me my sister is alive?" Andrew replied, "Scotland is a very peaceful country. We don't have much crime at all. Please try not to worry. I'm sure your sister is perfectly safe." For days later, Shella had reached out to him again. He told her that the other gentleman from the cafe had messaged him to say they were settling into their new routine very well. Adding, Andrew said he wished to draw a line under this and said that he would wipe his technology, not just to protect myself but also to protect her, so the police can't find her if they search my house. Shella had asked him to send a video of Benny Lynn to prove that she was safe, and he sent her one. She said, "I hope we can chat again, sir." He messaged back, "Maybe one day we can, once the dust has all settled." The video he had sent of her to Shella was an old one. At 3:20 p.m. on the 5th of March, police officers were dispatched to 21 Truane Avenue. This was the address the car had been registered to, home to 50-year-old Andrew Innes. The car was parked outside, and there was also a skip containing various items, including mattresses and debris. After knocking on the door, Andrew Innes opened it but only slightly, and they spoke to him on the doorstep. He refused to allow the officers into his house, saying that he was self-isolating and his daughter had just come out of the bath and needed to put some clothes on. The officers saw Jane Doe, who was fully clothed, inside the house through a crack in the door. They had a bad feeling and knew something was wrong. They insisted he let them inside. Upon entering the house, they described it as being in a state of disarray. It was seemingly under renovation. Kitchen utensils were on the stairs, and the cooker and units in the kitchen had all been removed. In the living room was Jane Doe, who was watching cartoons. One of the officers spoke to her. She confirmed that Andrew was not her father and they were of no relation to each other. When questioned, Andrew Innes said he had driven Benny Lynn and Jellica to Glasgow and left them at a cafe with a man he didn't know. He said he hadn't seen them since. They didn't believe the story he was telling, and they knew they needed to dig deeper for the truth. What came out of his mouth next would leave the offices stunned. Killed her. She's under the floor. We got into a fight and I killed her. But where was Jellica? Under the floor with her mom. I couldn't look after a child. The child was screaming, he said. Upon this shocking confession, Andrea Innes was arrested and taken into custody. Jane Doe was also taken away to safety. The following day, on the 6th of March, she was charged with the murder of Benny Lynn and Jellica, and the police now needed to find their bodies. When news of the appalling crime began to break and spread, the local residents left flowers and toys in tribute to Benny Lynn and Jellica outside of Truane Avenue. As the hunt for the bodies continued, the police began to piece together the chain of events. Benny Lynn had been using a dating website called Filipino Cupid as she was seeking companionship. It was here that she met 50-year-old Andrew Innes. The messages had initially just been general chit-chat and had then moved into video calls. He started to steer the conversation in a different direction. He asked her to send a photograph of herself that was sexual in nature, but she refused. He offered her a job as a community relations manager and money to work for him. He would also give her somewhere to stay, to which she replied, "If you want to employ me, I can do this in Bristol." On the 12th of February, the pair had agreed to meet up. After they had arranged the meeting, Andrew Innes had made several internet searches for the murder rates in Scotland, as well as what is chloroform used for and underfloor storage. In spite of the strict travel restrictions that were in place due to COVID-19, he had traveled down from Dundee to England to meet her in Kingswood, a distance of more than 400 miles. She had taken pity on him sleeping in his car as he couldn't get into a hotel, and he wasn't allowed to stay in her accommodation. She had wanted to see Scotland and the beauty it had to offer, so she agreed to go with him and stay at his for the weekend. Various photographs were taken of Benelin and Jellica in Dundee as they saw the sights and explored the city, as well as photographs of Andrew Innes. On the 23rd of February, he was seen purchasing gravel and DIY tools, and the next day a skip turned up at the house. The task in front of the officers was massive. They called upon the assistance of forensics teams alongside anthropologists, archaeologists, and geologists to ascertain if what he was saying had actually been true. It would take 2 weeks for the police to excavate the house, but they would come to discover that Andrew Innes had not been lying. Buried roughly 3 feet down, the bodies of Jellica and Benny Lynn were found on the 19th of March. Back in the Philippines, Sheila received a call. It was from Benny Lynn's estranged husband, Lexington. She could not believe what she was hearing, and she was tasked with giving the news to her parents, who were living in a different part of the country. Completely traumatized by the death of her sister and niece, she was left unable to sleep and kept trying to contact Benny Lynn on Messenger. Benny Lynn's devastated brother posted to social media, "I remember we used to play and you made me dance. You always made us happy. We will never forget you." As the police continued to look into Andrew Innes, they discovered that this software developer had no previous criminal convictions. He had been born in Germany on a military base in 1970. He had moved to Dundee from Derby at the age of 24 and had worked with DMA Design on various video games after attending the University of Aberdeen. He would later marry a woman from Japan and moved out there with her. The couple shared 3 children and also lived in California for a while, before going back to Scotland once more. In 2019, their marriage had fallen apart and he had been deported from Japan back to the UK, away from his wife and children. Andrew Innes was on 34 dating websites, and there were more disturbing discoveries. He was very experienced with technology and designed and built what was referred to as a scraper tool that could be bolted onto various websites. This meant he could only have women with young children included in the searches he was making on these sites. He harvested the data and put it into a spreadsheet, where women were graded based on age, weight, height, and whether or not they were mothers to young children. The profiles he had given the highest scores to were women with young children who were in their mid to late 20s. Now that the bodies of Benny Lynn and Jellica were found, it was time for a postmortem to be carried out. This would reveal the horrifying truth. Benny Lynn suffered major head injuries and internal bleeding. She had also been stabbed in the chest. It is believed she was murdered on the 23rd of February, the same day he was seen on CCTV buying DIY tools and gravel. Detective Constable Paul Hardy asked Ines how long she had been buried under the floor. Ines replied, "Last Friday she came up. We were going to spend the weekend together. I saw she had been chatting to about 50 men on the phone. It was either Monday or Tuesday. Took me a while to get through the concrete." He was adamant it hadn't been planned though. He said, "There was a fight and she came at me and I fought back and now she's dead. There was no premeditation. She came at me with a sushi knife." But CCTV would blow the story apart, as he was shown in AB and Q hardware store on King's Cross Road in Dundee, where he purchased the hammer that he would use to bludgeon her to death. He said that he had killed her in self-defense, fearing for his life, but his story would later change, saying he had suffered an auditory hallucination. It is believed that this is how Benny Lynn's death had actually occurred. As she stood in the kitchen making food, he attacked her, bludgeoning her repeatedly in the head with the hammer. He then went to his office to get a long-bladed knife that Ines had described as a samurai sword, before heading back into the kitchen and stabbing her with it. He had also bludgeoned her with the handle of the blade and again with the hammer. All of this had happened in front of 7-year-old Jane Doe. He proceeded to wrap up her dead body in a rubble sack, tarpaulin, and a blanket before putting her under the kitchen floor. Following the murder of Benny Lynn over the next 2 to 3 days, he had kept Jellica alive and sexually abused her. He would then murder her by applying pressure to her neck and mouth. He wrapped up her naked body in rubble sacks and put her with her mother under the kitchen floor. He said that she had wanted her mother and it seemed logical to me to put her with her mom. His DNA was also found on her body and DNA belonging to both Jellica and Ines was found on a condom in a bin at the house. Following the murders, he had told Jane Doe that Benny Lynn and Jellica were in hospital and that was why they weren't there. Officers who interviewed him said he was wallowing in self-pity and showed no remorse for his dreadful crimes. The investigators spoke to Jane Doe. She explained that Andrew Innes had what she called a heavy hammer and that he had put it in Benny Lynn's head. She said, "I tried to call the police. I couldn't speak." She said they had been playing a game of hide and seek when Jellica was murdered by Innes. She said, "I don't know where. I just know looking in the bathroom and he shut the door on me. Andrew shut the door at me, so it must be in the bathroom. I should have saved them, but I couldn't because I didn't know what was happening." During her time at the house, she was subjected to an appalling series of rape and sexual assaults. She said that after the assaults, where she would be handcuffed and gagged, he would give her money, on one occasion giving her £2 and 10 pence. She described being held captive by him. Andrew denied the allegations of sexual abuse against Jane Doe when he had been arrested, and during an interview on the 5th of March she said, "DNA evidence was found on clothing and handcuffs. Jane Doe had also tested positive for chlamydia. Andrew Innes had chlamydia." Andrew Innes' trial began at the High Court in Edinburgh on the 31st of January 2023, with Judge Lord Beckett presiding. Andrew admitted that he had killed Jellica and Benny Lynn, but denied murder and argued a defense of diminished responsibility. He had also denied charges of attempting to defeat the ends of justice and rape. On the 3rd day of his trial, he changed his story again. He now said that he had become what he called apocalyptically angry, after thinking that Benny Lynn resembled both his former partner and estranged wife. He said that from the neck down she looked like his estranged wife, and from the head up like the former partner. He said his former partner had left him in the most horrible way, dumping him through a text message, and that he thought of all the nasty things my wife had done to me and I got angry. The way she treated me, I was furious. I started to think some crazy things. I remember the blade going in once. She was lying on the floor and I was just hitting her until she stopped moving. In his testimony, he said that the killings had not been planned, saying if this was premeditated in any way, it would have been cleaner, adding that the hammer he had purchased was not a useful weapon. He said, It's ridiculous that I had returned with a hammer when I went out for petrol. Innes told the court that he was able to remember the initial strike and struggle that ensued in the kitchen before it moved out into the living room. He said it was an anger I have never experienced before in my entire life. When asked in his cross-examination what he had done with the bodies, he replied, "It was obvious that he had a deeply controlling nature when he admitted he had been seriously angry when his former wife had got a new haircut that he didn't approve of." He also said he had attempted to castrate himself with an electrical cord. There were moments when Innes would break down in the witness box and cry while speaking. A huge part of the trial focused on his state of mind. Psychiatrist Dr. Gordon Cowan, who specializes in forensic psychiatry, had met with Innes 8 times following his arrest and gave evidence on the 4th day of the trial. He explained that Innes' story had undergone multiple variations and changes, saying it had initially been self-defense, then he had been suffering with auditory hallucinations, and finally a combination of both. Dr. Cowan said he explained to the jury said he acted in self-defense from an attack. Then he spoke of an internal monologue with a voice of a kind of identity that was advising him to hurt the woman, and he was saying she's done nothing wrong. It's really difficult to know for sure the symptoms, if any, Mr. Innes has at this time. Innes had been diagnosed with Crohn's disease, a condition that would lead to him being hospitalized in February of 2021 at Ninewells Hospital on the outskirts of Dundee. He was prescribed steroids to help ease the symptoms. Defense lawyer Brian McConaughey asked Dr. Cowan if Innes could have been experiencing psychosis induced by steroid use, as Innes had said he was insane as a result of the steroids. He had been prescribed to take 40 milligrams a day, but the court heard he had taken an increased dose in the days before the murders. The fact that he had purchased the hammer from B and Q did not add up to this theory of psychosis. Dr. Cowan said that if someone was going through psychosis to the extent that they were going to commit murder, they would not be going about their day as usual with people not noticing. There's logic in his thought process, so I don't necessarily think it's indicative of somebody who is psychotic, he said. He emphasized that while it is a rare side effect of the medication, within the previous 12 months, no patient from NHS Tayside had experienced an episode of psychosis resulting from steroids, and majority of his colleagues had never seen it over the course of their entire careers. Dr. Cowan met Innes in September 2021 in prison, and Innes had spoken to members of his family and become aware of steroid-induced psychosis. This was the first time he had become aware of this phenomenon and thought it perhaps fit with what happened to him, Dr. Cowan explained. Several of the professionals did consider that he had a diagnosis of autism spectrum disorder, but the judge later said that this neither predisposed him to violence, nor that it gave any reduction on his culpability. One of the most heartbreaking moments of the trial came when the pre-recorded interview with Jane Doe was played. "Andrew killed Jellica when we were playing hide and seek," she said. She added that she didn't know what was happening. She also described the horrific sexual violence that she had been subjected to. The nature of the evidence was so distressing, members of the jury were offered counseling to cope with what they had seen and listened to. On the charges relating to Jane Doe, Innes accused her of lying, saying that some parts of her story didn't add up. He argued he would not have used a sock to cover her mouth as she had said, as there were hundreds of other items more suitable. "If I wanted to gag that child, I would have used an actual gag," he said. Innes told the jury that had the police officers arrived at his home just 24 hours later, they could have found her murdered body alongside Benny Lynn and Jellica. After 5 days, the prosecution and defense rested their cases. Following the evidence that had been presented, Judge Lord Beckett gave instructions to the jury to find him guilty on both counts of murder. After just 2.5 hours of discussions, they returned their verdict. Andrew Innes was found guilty. Alongside his convictions of murder, he was also convicted of rape and sexual abuse. Andrew Innes was sentenced to life in prison with a minimum term of 36 years that he must serve before he can even be considered for parole. Benny Lynn's family had traveled from the Philippines to the United Kingdom for the trial. They said in a statement that what had happened was the worst cruelty we could ever imagine, adding that they would be forever haunted by the appalling crimes. Benedicto, Benny Lynn's father, had had his life completely destroyed by the loss of his daughter and granddaughter. The grief was so devastating he had been left unable to work. For Lexington, what had happened to Benny Lynn and Jellica was devastating. He described his rage and pain at the cruelty that had been shown towards Jellica by Innes, and the appalling abuse and death she had suffered. It was later confirmed that Andrew Innes intended to appeal his conviction and sentence. His appeal was lodged at the High Court of Criminal Appeal in Edinburgh. The hearing will take place at a later date. No application for him to be released on bail pending his appeal was made, and he remains in prison. Jim Gamble, CEO of the Unique Safeguarding Group, who had also formerly led the Child Exploitation and Online Protection Organization, would say that it would be unusual for an offender like Innes if he did not have any previous victims. I doubt they are his only victims. Some people won't realize how close they came to engaging with this awful person. We see that all the time. We see predators who target single mothers, not just to manipulate and coercively control them, but to gain access to young children. I think anyone that knows of him, needs to reflect on what they know about him. I'm sure the police are doing exactly that. Police Scotland said they had contacted law enforcement in countries he was known to have gone to and had also collaborated with Interpol, but no other crimes had been uncovered. Benny Lynn's father said he cries every day and is struggling to come to terms with what happened. For me, I still haven't accepted that they're gone, he said. Her family also began campaigning for a charity called Kenlungan, which offers support and help to people from the Philippines who live in the United Kingdom, including those affected by domestic abuse and violence. Benedicto said, "I've now decided to dedicate my life to defend the rights of women and children. All Benny Lynn wanted was to love and be loved. She made the enormously brave decision to move away from her home to a country she didn't know, hoping for a bright future." To this day, Scheller still calls her sister's phone just to hear her voice on the voicemail. She said that she will never forget either Benny Lynn or Jellica because they will be with her wherever she goes, adding, "I will always be with them." Thank you for joining us on this journey into the depths of unsolved mysteries. Cold cases not only challenge our understanding of the past, but also ignite our curiosity and determination for answers. Remember to subscribe to stay updated on our latest investigations. And if you have any information regarding the cases we've covered, don't hesitate to reach out. Together, we can shed light on the shadows of the past and bring closure to those who seek it. Until next time, stay vigilant, stay curious, and never stop seeking the truth.